Have a test or exam coming up? Chances are you're overwhelmed by how much stuff you need to get done and how little time you have left. Things pile up and life gets in the way, and suddenly you find yourself stressed with a mountain of things to complete. Yeah, let's fix that. Hey guys, welcome back to Dose of Joy. Today we're going to be focusing on effective study strategies and tips that I personally use to deal with this last minute study struggle. From this video, you can apply these practical things directly into the days leading up to your exams to maximize your time and overall grades, hopefully. Let's begin! Number 1. This one seems quite intuitive, but I'm going to include it anyway. Make sure you know what you're going to be tested on. Obviously, I don't mean the exact questions that your teachers or lecturers will ask you, but more so the area of focus that if you focus on those things, you'll hit most of the marks on the exam. While I personally don't like to know things on a superficial level, when you're short on time, you're desperate, and knowing what you're going to be tested on specifically will help you save a lot of time and maximize that study period. For me personally, my lecturers would actually emphasize what needed to be known on the exam in that lecture. And if it wasn't important, or if it was just for curiosity, then they would say something like this.
Don't need to memorize this. This is just useful for the people who like to feel complete.
And I find that it really helps to focus on the first and the last slides of the lectures, because generally the lectures will outline what you want to focus on and what they will cover in the lecture. And one of my personal favorite resources to use is the online discussion board. And I'm not sure if this applies to you because not all of my subjects in uni actually offered it. But for things like psychology, a lot of students would just post their questions and post what do I need to know on the discussion board. So that basically just helps you out a lot. And if you really just don't know what's on the exam and what you should focus on, simply just asking the lecturer, sending them an email and saying, there's so much content, what should I really prioritize my time doing? Hopefully they're nice enough to reply and say, okay, you got an A, B, C, D, just to save you time and stress. Number 2, spaced repetition. This means that with the remaining days and weeks that you have leading up to your exam, you want to be spacing out what you learn and revisiting it frequently and being consistent with that. Because you're behind and you feel like you don't have enough time, you might feel like you have to cram, say, 4 hours of one subject in one go before moving on to the next and the next. But personally, when I did this, I just felt like I couldn't remember a lot of the things by the next day. Instead, by breaking this 4-hour chunk into, say, 2 hours or 1 hour and revisiting that consistently throughout the day, it helped me remember the content a lot more. And even if you're applying this spaced repetition into your study plan, it's really not effective unless if you're consistent. So if I were to do that consistently for 2 days and then drop off for 3 days and then come back to it, you're again gonna likely forget about what you've just learnt because it's in your short-term memory. Chances are you're gonna forget it. And then you'll be wasting your time relearning the content as opposed to just reinforcing it. Number 3, active learning. There's this quote I really like from Jim Kwik, who's a very successful memory coach, and he says, "You don't learn by consuming, you learn by creating." And I 100% agree, because you can rewatch a lecture, but you're going to remember the content so much more if you write notes out from that lecture or you create mind maps or something like that to help you retain this information. For me, instead of reading my notes over and over again, I would actually look like a freak, basically, and verbalize it. So I would technically act as if I was talking to someone and trying to explain it to them. And this also made it very noticeable when I didn't know a concept well enough, because, it'd be silent and I would realize that, okay, I don't know it as well. But obviously the optimal situation is if you actually have someone there with you who can ask you questions and put you on the spot. But understandably, if no one wants to hear about your Krebs cycle, then, which is everyone, then I'd recommend trying out my technique, or you can write up some questions and then answer it as if you were having a conversation with someone. Possibly one of my favorite forms of active learning is actually doing practice exams or my past tests that I've already done during that semester. This option just gets right to the chase because it's not only testing whether you actually know the concepts, but also it's exactly what you're going to be getting when you're doing the actual exam, and so it preps you up for that. And if your subject is new or you just happen to not have practice exams to do, you can definitely look at your content, your lecture material, and just make questions from that and try and answer it. And another thing that really helped me out was to redo the tests that I had already done that term or semester. So with physiology, for example, we had 2 mid-semester exams, so I just basically redid those. And really, the questions were very similar to the exam anyway, so I sort of just cruised along that way. And because I went over it, I also clarified mistakes that I made that I didn't again repeat on the exam. And to repeat the quote from before, you learn by creating, not by consuming. So if you have a lot of stuff to memorize, which was basically my life in science, it just really helps to turn that content into a song or a story or something that will help you remember things that mean nothing to you. For example, from high school, I still remember the exact order of the periodic table up to 20 because we sang it in a song, and I just can't unlearn it now. So if there's some sort of process or thing that you really need to remember and it's really hard to do so, just YouTube it, because there are some very talented people out there who have done the hard work for you and have made some really catchy songs or whatever. And also, I find that acronyms are just incredibly useful. So when I was doing Latin in high school, some of my friends made this acronym called NVAGDA. I literally have not forgotten it, and it's essentially just saying the order of the word forms. I don't even need to use it ever. But it is now ingrained in my head, and if someone were to say NVAGDA, I'm like, yes, I know the order. And finally, the last active learning strategy I'm going to share with you today is to ask questions. I think this is the thing that has contributed most to my marks in my exams. The majority of my friends know that I get super annoying during that SWOT-FAC exam period because I'm always messaging and being like, what does this mean? Or why isn't this? But when you ask these questions, when you learn the answer, it really sticks in your brain. So when I was revising my lectures and, reciting my notes, when I came across something that I didn't understand, I would immediately write that question down. Because I knew that if I were to continue doing my notes and stuff and then try and think of the question later, no way was I going to remember it. And then once I had questions compiled, I would send an email to my lecturers or I would post on the discussion board, and that really helped me out. And most of the time when I was going to post a question on the discussion board, some student had already asked it before me. So that saved me a lot of time. Number 4, intentional breaks. Please don't underestimate the importance of breaks. I know that if you're running low on time and you've still got so much stuff to complete, it just seems counterintuitive to actually take a break. But really you need it in order to survive this exam period. I used to get caught up in the downward spiral of, exams are only for the next 2 weeks, I can suck it up. Or, exercise can wait. But if I could talk to my uni self, I'd say, get off your ass, stop reciting like a weirdo, and just prioritize your well-being. In exchange for some marks, I would actually refuse to take a break because I thought that if I rest, I'm going to willingly lose marks when I could have actually spent that time studying, which is just so unhealthy. And now that I've learnt from all the shit that I went through in uni, there is no way I am giving up my well-being for a subject. And if you're still thinking that breaks are a waste of time, breaks are actually essential because they can optimize your learning. When you rest, you're refreshed, you're able to focus for longer periods of time and therefore maximize your time. So for the med entry GAMSAT, I just remember cramming for maybe 2-3 weeks before the GAMSAT and ended up burning out like 4 days before it. I was so stressed, wasn't able to sleep, all these shit things were happening, and I just had to stop to save myself. And then for the remaining days, I didn't study, I didn't do any practice exams, I couldn't even apply spaced repetition because I was just that burnt out. And as well as feeling so stressed in the moment, these anxiety-like symptoms actually continued throughout the year. So I will link my mental health journey below because, yeah, it details more of what happened. So don't be like me and just assume that you'll be fine by doing all this intense cramming and compensating your well-being, because even if you're feeling okay leading up to the exam and even on the exam day, the symptoms might not actually appear until after all that adrenaline's gone. So to ensure that you actually do get that balance during this exam period, I would highly recommend planning breaks intentionally in your day so that you don't have an excuse not to take them. And last but not least, have a healthy inner dialogue. I know that last minute studying really takes a mental toll on us, so that usually leads to things like negative self-talk. So here are some things that I would have liked my uni self to have thought during this period. I'm doing what I can in this situation and context. If it doesn't go the way I planned, then I'll learn and adapt for next time. Sometimes you just have to let go and accept that you're doing the best that you can in this moment. And if you feel up to your limit, stressed out or burnt out, be empathetic to yourself and just know that you've done enough. And also, I used to give myself a really hard time and ask, why didn't I study sooner? Which is a completely useless question to ask when you're studying for an exam. Asking it won't magically give you more time or more motivation. It will just make you feel like shit and distract you from the study that you need to get done. So instead of focusing on the past, focus on the present and think, I am going to use the time now wisely and I'm going to study strategically. Because that's the only thing you can control, what you do in this precise moment. Another one is, I'll be okay, I've dealt with this before. I'm prone to catastrophizing and I'd always think, oh, I'm gonna fail this exam. But what always brings me back is that I know I've done VCE. That shit was hard. So really, you'll be okay no matter what. You've gone through equally or more challenging situations than this one, and you've survived it, so you'll survive again. And finally, what is the worst case scenario? Again, I'm a catastrophizer, so I would look at these exams like the end of the world. That if I failed, it was the end of the world. But if I really thought about it, I just needed to repeat that subject and that was it. And that's it. I wasn't going to die. It's just I have to do something that's more inconvenient for my degree. Okay, so that's all. That's all the content. I know it's a lot, but I do want you guys to do well. Good luck to all of you last minute crammers. I really hope that you look after your well-being. And I will see you in the next video. Bye!